Well, I'm with the creator of Crabgrass, which is a new cartoon strip that's coming to our paper. And it must be really strange to be in that world because we see so few cartoon strips that are actually starting in papers across the country. How weird is it to be in this kind of vacuum?
It's pretty weird. It really is. I mean, uh, and it's as weird as it can be for to have achieved a goal that you've been kind of chasing after your whole life. I've always wanted to be a cartoonist. Always wanted to be, especially a newspaper cartoonist. I worked for a number of years as a web cartoonist and self-publishing things like that. But to finally achieve this goal and kind of get that brass ring is like I said, I've been working for it my whole life, but it still just kind of blindsides you by how surreal it all is.
Well,
Um,
it looks really fun. Now you have two main characters in Crabgrass, right?
correct.
Miles and Kevin. Give us a little background on the two boys.
Sure. The strip was originally conceived loosely based off of myself and my best friends growing up. Uh,
So you're the Miles, right?
yes, I'm Miles, and Kevin is just a number of kids that I knew growing up. I did have a best friend who lived next door, and a best friend at school, and best friend from my old neighborhood, and he's just kind of an amalgamation of all of them. But really, the characters kind of took on a life of their own fairly quickly, to where Miles is really not very much of a representation of me anymore. He's kind of become his own character. He's a lot more, I like to say, more neurotic than I am.
Ah,
Yeah. Kevin, just as much of a troublemaker as ever. And I just kind of really like the way they play off of each other. They have a dynamic that oftentimes they switch positions. One's the straight man, the other is the chaos agent. Um, but yeah, as the strip has grown, like I said, they've become less and less like myself and my friends growing up, and more kind of their own characters over time.
were you an only child?
Yes, yes, I was. I had cousins and things that I would visit frequently, but no, I never really had a like a big family at home. It was me and my mom. Um, we had some extended family that would come live with us sometimes, but for short periods. But mostly it was just me and my mother.
Well, it looks like he's kind of under the thumb of his parents at all times. Is that kind of the way you were?
Yeah, it's kind of my mom was she had to run everything by herself, so she was kind of a disciplinarian, and it was a huge motivation for me to not get in trouble, to make sure I did my chores and make sure I did well in school. And that's reflected a little bit in Miles's character. He's Kevin often thinks of him as the smart one because he makes better grades in school. Miles mostly cares about his grades in school because he doesn't want to get in trouble at home. Um, and that's kind of how I was growing up. I wasn't necessarily an overachiever or anything like that. I didn't care a lot about school. I'd rather be drawing cartoons, but I knew that if I didn't, hit the books and keep my grades up, then I'd be in trouble with mom at home.
So
So
when you were drawing these cartoons in school, would kids look at them and say, "Oh, that's cool. Draw me a character," or how did they react to that?
absolutely, that was, yeah. Drawing cartoons was one of the first tricks that I discovered I could do. And it was like, for even to this day, it's still kind of a card trick that you can do to entertain people at a moment's notice. But yeah, I noticed very early on that my peers were impressed by the little, cartoon characters that I would draw. I'd draw Disney characters or Garfield or something like that, and they'd be really impressed by it and want me to draw them or characters for them or something like that. And so that was a easy way to make friends and kind of make myself relevant in a grade school setting.
Were you an avid comics reader? Did you read comic books? Did you watch daytime? Saturday morning cartoon shows were like the only day of the week I could get up was
Mm-hmm.
Saturday morning, so I could see all those cartoon shows. But
Absolutely.
where do you fall in that spectrum? Where were you in terms of, because I know that parents would say, that's no career. There's no career there. You're not going to do that. But where did you fall? Was it something fun for you to watch or follow?
Oh, I was a huge cartoon watcher. I still am a huge cartoon watcher. I'll watch anything animated just about. I never missed Saturday morning. cartoons as a kid. Um, I started reading comic books in my early teens. And even then, I was really more interested in the artists than the titles themselves. So I didn't necessarily have a favorite superhero. But if an artist that I really liked was drawing a certain superhero, those are the books I would buy. Um, for comic strips, I didn't really even get a newspaper to my
What?
house.
No, I can't hear that.
I didn't get it. My mom wasn't a big newspaper reader, and so I didn't really get the experience growing up of having a funnies page or something like that. But at school, we would go to the library and we were tasked with picking out a book to read, and we get points for the number of books. And some of us figured out that there was a sort of loophole that you could get the comics collections, and that counted. And
Of course, of
so yeah, I
course.
rushed down there and read. I read through all the Peanuts and all the Garfields and the Calvin and Hobbes and everything I could get my hands on. Um, and so yeah, a lot during my formative years, I did end up sort of binging a lot of comic strips. Um, but I do think that my artistic style and my sort of philosophy of cartooning is pretty heavily influenced by the cartoons that I watched, a lot of Bugs Bunny and things like that.
Well, and you don't you also set this in a world where we really aren't influenced by kind of the distractions that we have today?
A little bit, yeah. Yeah. Initially I wanted to establish that the strip was set uh hard in the 80s. And if you go back and read the early strips, you see a lot of call outs to pop culture that was relevant back then, just kind of dropping the signal that this is taking place not now, but in the past. Um, but as the strip has evolved, I've kind of let go of that hard timeline and really just kind of kept the spirit of uh, just what I remember about childhood, going outside and playing in the woods and things like that. And there were no cell phones, so you don't see cell phones in the strip, things like that.
They're not bugging you all the time to play Minecraft, right?
Correct, yeah.
How old are the boys?
Although I do think Miles would really be into Minecraft if it
Okay.
were
All
part of his
right.
world.
How old
um,
are they?
they're 9 years old.
And will they age, or do they just stay 9 years old forever?
I have no intention of aging these characters. Um, I have did a short project called Crabgrass Teen Years for my Patreon. That was just a Patreon exclusive, and it's just a few strips with Kevin and Miles as teenagers. But that's about as close as I've ever come to messing with the idea of their age. For the life of the strip, as far as I'm concerned, they'll always be 9 years old, constantly in the third grade, just forever and ever.
Well, you also have, though, Kevin's family, and that kind of runs a range with those kids. It's like, what is up with this bunch, right?
Yeah.
What inspired them?
Them, they were inspired a lot by my next door neighbor growing up, who's a close friend of mine. He had, I think, three brothers and a sister, and his mom and dad both lived at home, so that's different than Kevin. But whereas like Miles lives with his mom and dad, and I grew up with just my mom. But yeah, that was based. I was over at his house a lot, and being exposed to sort of the chaos of a big household with lots of kids running around, parents being outnumbered. That's kind of where I drew some inspiration for Kevin's family.
And the older brother seems ripe for just anything. I
Yeah.
think you can do a lot with him.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely want to bring all of these characters, and I'm working several months ahead, so a lot of this that has already happened, but I definitely intend to bring more of these characters into the spotlight as the strip goes on. Kevin and Miles will always be the center, but there are a lot of great stories to tell with his parents and Kevin's siblings and things like that. So
How
and
how will you deal with political issues or timely issues that are that we're talking about now? Will you bring them in, or is this a world where those things don't exist?
um, yeah, that's a bit of a struggle because those kinds of things are relevant to me, and I've always incorporated them into my comic strips in the past. Um, every now and then, something will happen, and I'll do sort of a wink and a nod to it, you know. But yeah, it's difficult for me to speak explicitly about things that are happening right now in a
Sure.
strip that sort of, feels like it happened 30 years ago or 40 years ago. Gosh.
It's yeah, don't mention how long ago that was because you were
Yeah,
around
for me,
then.
30 years ago is the 70s, but it's not anymore.
No, it's not anymore. Well, the relationship between the two boys, because one's black, one's white, how does that mesh? How does that figure in? And will you discuss that?
Yeah, that gets discussed because I think it's true to the spirit of the strip. Initially being based off my own life, it's easy for me to lift discussions that I've had with my friends growing up. I grew up in a street just like this, and it was a predominantly white area. We were the only black family on the block. I was one of just a handful of black kids at my school, often the only black child in my class. And when you have two children from different races, um, race isn't necessarily an issue of contention, but it is a subject of curiosity, you know. And Kevin has no problem asking questions about things that he doesn't understand or things that he doesn't get. And Miles has no problem, answering those questions as best he can. Obviously, he only has so much experience and these type of matters himself, and only knows so much. I try to keep it light, but I'm not afraid of, addressing the issue, in the comment
Sure. Oh,
goes
that's
along.
great because it's nice to see comic strips take another step. It
Mhm.
isn't always falling down in a funny ending at the end of the panel.
Yeah, yeah.
When you start plotting this out, how
Mhm.
far out do you look? Like, are you looking at storylines now that we'll see in the fall, at Christmas, next year? How does that work?
Yeah, I'm currently working on a storyline uh that people won't see until March of next year. Um, well, while the strip was in development, we were just cranking them out, and they were going up online, but we built such an incredible buffer that we've got months and months of strips to work with now. So I'm working well ahead of schedule now. But anytime now that I'm at the point where I have to produce a strip a day, anytime I take a day off, it cuts into my buffer. So that buffer gets a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter, a little bit shorter until
You're not getting a vacation. I'm sorry. We're cutting that off, right? Well,
yeah.
do you go old school? Do you do pen and ink or are you doing things on an iPad or how are you drawing?
Actually, when I first started, I was working on an iPad, fantastic machine, did everything that I needed it to do, but the post-production was difficult on the iPad. So um, the closer we got to actually launching the strip, I decided to go ahead and get Wacom Cintiq and start doing things on my computer, on my Mac. And so yeah, to answer your question, everything's digital. I don't own a pen or a piece of paper anywhere in the house. Obviously, that's not where I started. I think I went full digital for all my art projects probably like 10 or 15 years ago. So it's
So
been
you
all
can't be
digital.
called an ink stained wretch like the rest of us, right?
Pretty much.
It doesn't happen. And
I
then
hope
there
not.
isn't there a book coming out that has some relationship to this? What's that?
Yeah, yeah. We've got the first Crabgrass book coming out on the is it the 20th or the 27th of this month? I guess I should probably find out. I feel like it's the 27th of this month. The first book is coming out. It's a beautiful book, and it's also just another sort of lifelong dream fulfilled, to have a book created by a major publisher that I can put on my shelf. They sent me the proofs. It looks fantastic. I can't wait to share it with people. That's what everybody in my family is getting for Christmas here. So it's really,
Spoiler alert, right?
yeah, yeah.
Well,
I'm really
what is it
excited
like
about
having all these dreams come true?
it. It's been an adjustment, honestly. I mean, I've kind of lived my life thinking that, if something good happens, then something bad has to happen to sort of balance it out, which is weird. And then you hit like a few years of just great stuff happening. And then you think, okay, maybe I'm not the center of the universe, and good things happening to me doesn't necessarily throw the cosmic balance out of whack. And it's just been kind of, it's been really a lesson in gratitude, you know. Also, I've just gotten to work with such incredible people. After, for my whole life, pretty much working in a vacuum, by myself, finally, getting to work with professional editors and things like that is really it's been eye-opening for me.
Well, I can hardly wait. I can hardly wait for it to start. I got to ask you the big question though. Why is it called crabgrass?
Oh, well, I don't know.
Peanuts. Why is it called peanuts?
Yeah, exactly. It was one of those things. It was just, I never had a good answer to this question. When the strip first came about, when it was first conceived, my wife and I were having ice cream. And I was going to make a final go for this comic strip thing. I had been laid off from my job as a graphic designer. I got into the end of my unemployment, and it was time to get to work. And it was either go out there and just like find a real job, another job as a graphic designer, which wasn't my dream, or try and make something happen with these comics. And my wife said, go for it. She supported me all through that. And so we went out for ice cream and kind of workshopped an idea for a comic strip. And I think it was her idea to set it in the 80s. And I based it off of my childhood. And the name of the strip just, struck me like a lightning bolt. It just came to me fully formed. Sometimes that happens. And something about it. I think it's just it invokes a sort of imagery that is of the time that I want the strip to speak to. This crabgrass we had crabgrass in our yards growing up. It's not really something you hear about anymore, but everybody had it.
I still haven't. So just know.
Yeah, it's kind of like crabgrass is something you deal with when you're in a certain tax bracket where you're kind of doing your own landscaping, you're mowing your own lawn and things like that, and and that's kind of the tax bracket that I grew up in and the neighborhood that I grew up in, and everybody in the neighborhood struggled with it. And also it's kind of just like this resilient weed getting into places it's not supposed to be, and I think that's sort of reflective of the boys. I don't know, it just as soon as the idea occurred to me that was the title, it just fit. It was like I never even thought of it.
It was meant to be.
Yeah.
Well, okay. Does your wife then become a character in the strip at all? Is there somebody there that we look at and you say, oh, there she is?
You know what? Probably everybody I know is a character in the strip, honestly, because there's so many characters in the strip that I draw from my personal experiences, people I know. My wife, my daughter is in the strip in different ways. There's a little bit of me in every character. So yeah, probably she makes it in there.
Okay. She's the nice one, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. She's the best character in the whole strip.
The best one, the most loving, all those, that's the wife.
Yeah.
Right.
You got it.
Well, Tauhid, thank you so much. I appreciate this. And like I say, I'll be looking forward to seeing the strip. So make sure you do good things. And if you write about us, be nice.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.